class.
Perfect. Well, welcome on in, everybody. Welcome back to another Michael's Community Classroom. For those of you who haven't joined us before, my name is Allie W. I'm from Yarn Inspirations, and I will be helping moderate today's class. We are here with the fabulous Marley Bird, who will be our instructor this evening. And just as a reminder, if you have any questions, we'll try and get to as many as we can. So feel free to just drop those questions in the chat and I'll help get those over to Marley throughout our class tonight.
Cool. I'm going to open up the chat also. I just didn't even think about that yet. What am I thinking? Hi, guys. All right. Am I ready to take it away, Allie?
You're ready.
All right, cool. I wasn't sure. I was like, did I just jump in and interrupt you? Hey, everyone. I see some familiar faces and some familiar names. As Allie said, my name is Marley Bird. I'm a knitwear and crochet designer, as well as an ambassador for Yarn Inspirations. I do several classes here with the Michael's Community Classroom, and I am happy to be assisting you all today. So a couple things before we jump in. This class is listed as an intermediate class. Now, I'm also going to mention that if you are an adventurous beginner, somebody who actually knows how to knit and purl, and you can kind of read through patterns, at least to start to decipher what you're supposed to do, you could absolutely make one of these sweaters. Okay, so don't let the word intermediate actually scare you. You can do this sweater. It's a basic stockinette stitch sweater with some ribbing down around the bottom hem and around the neckline and around the cuffs. The rest of it really is more along the lines of understanding the pattern and what it is telling you to do in order to be able to construct this sweater. So my goal in this class, because I don't know, I mean, if you don't already know this, I can't teach you how to do an entire sweater from start to finish in an hour. I can talk you through it, but I can't knit that fast. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the pattern, talk to you about how you're going to tackle this pattern. What are some of the things you need to look for as a person who may have never knit a sweater before? What does it mean when you're decreasing with an SSK on one side or a purl two together or a knit two together on the other side? What about those stripes? How do we make sure that we keep the stripes the same size? Do we have to keep the stripes the same size? Little things like that. So we're going to work through this all together. Okay, guys? The other thing is, if you are tackling this sweater along the way and you need help sometime down the road, you can always tag us on social media. You can use hashtag Yarnspo, hashtag Marley Bird. I'm the Marley Bird on Instagram. Be like, hey, look at what I'm working on this sweater. I have a question about something. You can tag us and we can try and lend you a helping hand. Or I also have, ironically enough, my first sweater class actually on the Marley Bird YouTube channel and on yarnspirations.com, where we did a full sweater. It just doesn't have the stripes. It's just plain sweater. So that will help you out there as well. So my goal in telling you all of that is, don't leave this class discouraged, be like, oh my gosh, there's just so much. It's okay, because what is it? Somebody said to me once, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Sort of that sort of thing. When you go to make a sweater, we're going to take it one little step at a time. Okay, guys? So the pattern link is in the chat already provided, or it's wherever you are watching this video. Hopefully it's in the video description box for you to be able to get this pattern. And it's called the Right Strike Knit Sweater. And this sweater is made using the brand new Caron Ogo Big Donuts. Okay. Now, if you haven't seen the Caron Big Donut Ogos, well, this is what they look like. They come in a carefully curated collection of five colors that are like perfectly put together, which is super convenient when you're going to do something along the lines of stripes or something, right? Because now you already have all the colors put together that look great together. You can separate the colors out and do them exactly like the sample, whichever colorway you're going to choose, or you can just let the yarn get on your needles and just go with the flow and let the stripes kind of land wherever they may. It all depends on the type of person you are, right? I know many of you who are type A that are like, there's no way I'm just going to go with the flow. My stripes got to line up. They got to be perfect. I need to know exactly how many rows for each stripe. And that's how it's going to be. Heather, I see you. And I know that you're like, yes, that's me. She's speaking my language. I totally get that. So we're going to work through that together. As far as how many ogos you need, that all depends on the size you're going to make. So what we're going to do now, let's go ahead and take a look at that pattern, because we're going to start to talk about the sizing, how you choose what size, and then we're going to talk through the details from there. Okay, guys? So we're not going to do a whole lot of knitting. We're just a whole lot of talking. So be prepared, sit back, relax. We're going to have a good time together. All right, so am I in frame? I'm in frame, everything's good, and we're good to go. Okay, so Caron Big Donut Ogo. This is your Ogo, okay? So I have this one here. It's a different colorway. This one's the raspberry glaze. This one here is spiced ginger. But what you can tell is the great thing about these patterns is Yarnspiration puts it together in such a way that they break up the colors of the Ogo, just like so. And then they put a letter on each color. And so what I could do, even though this isn't the same color, I could apply, like I could say, this will be my color B, my color C, color D, color E, color A. You see what I mean? So I can apply the letter to whatever color I want to be, where I want that to be. Okay, so when you're looking at a pattern for Ogos, this is how they help you split up the color. So it always helps me to take my Ogo and I just turn it upside down so that way I can see the colors on the opposite side. As far as yarn amounts, just like any other pattern, it tells you how many balls or donuts you're going to need. So this tells you either 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, depending on the size you're making. The other thing that's great about Caron patterns or Yarnspiration patterns is they divide the colors or the sizes up by colors also, which makes it really great for you to be able to follow along with your size throughout the pattern, because it stays the same color whenever the instructions are given for a particular size. Okay, so if you get a chance to print this out with color, that's super convenient. If not, if you have to print it out in black and white, or maybe you don't print it out, whatever you do, you could always use a highlighter and you can highlight whatever size you would make. So for me, like I'm a large girl, so I would be making the 2, 3X, so I would need 8. And you might be like, all right, well, Marley, why are you highlighting it over here on the sizes? Like, really, what does that matter? Because we really want to know what's happening when we get into the meat of things, right? Well, what if I put this project away in a bag and I don't come back to it for a year and I forget what size I'm working on? This lets me know immediately, oh, I want to make sure that I'm working on that size. I can see I highlighted it. It also lets me know that I'm going to follow the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th size in. So typically when patterns are written, and we're going to come to it down here, but like if this were written for some sort of instructions, it would say 5, and then it had parentheses. It would say 6, 7, 7, 8, 9, and parentheses. So that 5 pertains to that size, the 6 to that one, 7 to that one, so on and so forth. So if I know that I'm working with the 5th size in, I know that whenever I come to instructions that are written like this, I will always work with the 5th number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not the 5th number inside the parenthesis, the 5th number total. Everybody with me on that? I understand this could be basic pattern reading, but there are a lot of people who just don't know this. So this highlighter tip is really super handy. Or if you're able to print out in color, you'll have the nice colors available. But even then, I would still circle the size you're making. Okay. It says US size 7 and size 8 needles. Usually when you're doing something where there's a ribbing and then a stockinette, you usually will do your ribbing with a smaller size and the stockinette with a larger size. That's why you have 2 size needles. But notice it doesn't tell you whether those needles are supposed to be straight needles or if they're supposed to be circular needles. Okay. Now I can tell you right now, this sweater is knit back and forth. It is not knit in the round, which some people will be like, oh, well, then I don't need my circulars. However, if you're somebody like me making one of the larger sizes, if I need to put the back of this sweater say it's like, I didn't look yet. Let's say it's 200 stitches. Am I going to get 200 stitches on this little tiny needle right here? Like, if I am, wow, that's going to be the most uncomfortable knit ever. Okay. So it's so much better for you to use a circular needle. Even this one's too short. This is a 16-inch, but using a circular needle that maybe is a 30-inch, a 29-inch, a 40-inch that is longer. And I treat it as if it's just two needles. Like, I'm not going to knit in the round. I'm going to get to the end of my round and then turn, get to the end of my round and then turn. That will make for a much more comfortable knit, less stress on my wrist, and it will be better for you. So even though the pattern doesn't tell you circular needles, if you are somebody who's making one of the larger sizes, circular needles might be easier for you to accommodate the number of stitches you will be using. Okay. Same thing when you're making the sleeves or making the front, all those good things, because true story, guys, I told you I'm a larger size. I've made the back of a sweater before, and I've been like at a sit knit, and somebody asked me if I was making a blanket. I was like, no, it's the back of my sweater, but thanks. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of stitches. It's a lot of stitches. Okay. So that's where we talk about the needles, whether you want straights or circulars. You make the decision what works best for you. Stitch markers are going to be there to help you keep your place. Stitch holders, that's pretty self-explanatory. You're going to have something to hold stitches. You can have scrap yarn as stitch holders. You don't have to use like an actual tool. And then a yarn needle for weaving things together or seaming things together and weaving in your tails. Okay, pretty basic for the materials. Abbreviations over here. There aren't any abbreviations over here that are too like out of this world. As an intermediate or even an adventurous beginner, you should know what all of these abbreviations mean. Nothing here is like super crazy, which is awesome. That's a really good sign for you that this is a piece of knitting that you could actually accomplish, because there's nothing here really big that you have to learn, right? The biggest task here is going to be not getting bored with the stockinette. That's what the stripes are there for, right? And then also making sure that your stripes match up, your front and back meet up, and then seaming it together will be a little bit tricky if you've never done it before. But honestly, you guys, it's a matter of just taking your time and taking it step by step. And it's really easy to do. You just can't rush it. Okay. I want to talk about the sizing real quick, because some people get really confused with this, and it's because of this little thing called ease. E-A-S-E. Anybody see that word before and think to themselves, what the heck does that mean? Okay. Ease is just a fancy term, so to speak, of the inches or the size difference between the finished piece and your actual size of your body. It's the amount of distance you have between your sweater and your actual body. Anybody whether you've done it now or in the past, had some sort of a ribbing shirt, right? And you pull it out and it looks like the ribbing's all pulled together and you're like, that's not going to fit anybody, right? Then you put it on and it like suction cups to your body, but it fits your body, right? Okay. That would be considered negative ease because it's smaller than your body, but it stretches out to fit your body. Then you have the sweaters that are really big and you put them on, you're like swimming in them, right? Because you have lots of room to move around in, and you know that they are bigger than your body. Those sweaters have positive ease, all right? It's that simple. Now, the reason I'm bringing it up is because this particular sweater has positive ease. And I know that because let's stick with our purple here. This purple, it says to fit the bust measurement of 48 to 54. Okay, 48 to 54. But the finished size is a 63. So I'm a 52. The finished size is a 63. That's an 11-inch difference. That means around my bust, so this is not what I look like, but around my bust here, it will be 11 inches larger than my actual bust measurement. So that just means I'm going to have some wiggle room, okay? The reason this is important to point out is maybe you're like, oh yeah, I like the idea of having a sweater that's nice and big and roomy. That's usually really great for some of the smaller sizes. It looks like they're all right around a 10-inch difference. Okay, a 10-inch difference of positive ease. That is that's a really good, normal, natural fit. And if you're somebody who's like, well, I don't know if I really want it that big, or maybe I want it bigger, here's my tip. Kelly, can you go to my face real quick? Maybe. She might have walked away. There she is. Hi. Okay. So here's the tip, you guys. Go to your closet, pull out a sweater or a shirt or whatever, something similar to what you're going to make. Pull it out of your closet, one that you like to wear. Okay. If you don't have one, if you have one that you know you hate to wear because it fits too tight, pull that out of your closet. Set it down on your bed and measure it. Measure it just across the front, right at where your bust is. Measure it across the front. If it's a sweater you love to wear and you measure it and it ends up, I don't even know what half is, 63 is, whatever. Let's just, for round numbers, let's say 60. It's 30 on the front. You know, it's going to be 30 on the back. So it's going to be 60 inches. And you're like, okay, so I'm a 52. I like it where it fits 60 inches. This sweater is going to be 63. Am I okay with that 3-inch difference? Okay. Am I okay with that 3-inch difference? Well, what's my option? All right. Well, I could go down a size and that one goes to a 56. Well, that means it's going to be smaller by 4 inches. I like 60 inches, right? So you have to make that decision. Are you going to be okay with the 63? Do you want it to be a little tighter and do 56? Does that make sense? This is important because in knitting, we have the ability to make these sweaters fit the way we want them to fit, right? So even though at the store, I'm a 2X, 3X, maybe I really like the way the 1X of this particular knit sweater is going to fit. And I know that based on sweaters I already own. And so by taking my guesswork out of it, by measuring a sweater I already own, I'm more likely to get a finished sweater that I really like. Is everybody with me on that? Yeah. Okay. This is one of those things that probably when you first heard me say that, you're like, oh man, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought about that. And that's the case. Like a lot of people, we just don't think about it. But our closet, I mean, for better or worse, it's either a place that has a bunch of clothes we don't like, which we know, okay, those are the sizes I don't like, or it has a bunch of things we like. So you're like, oh, those are the sizes I like. So you have answers to the question of, well, which size should I make? Go to your closet and take a look. All right. So don't just assume that because maybe you're a 2X, 3X normally that you're going to make the 2X, 3X on this. Take a look at your sizes in your closet, see what you like that fits well, and then make an educated decision. It could be that you're like, you know what, I'm okay, 3 inches. And remember, it's not just 3 inches on the front, it's 3 inches all the way around. So it gets pretty dispersed. I would be okay with 63 inches over 60 inches. I'd be like, that's not so bad. That's totally fine. But you have to make that decision for you. So that will help you decide when you are choosing what size to make. Everybody good with that? Yep. I see a lot of nodding heads. Good. All right. Awesome. Back to my hands, Kelly. Okay. So that's about everything on here. You decide what size you're going to make. You can see these are the finished sizes. So these are this is what you're making. You see what I mean? Like 63, that's a 30, what is that? 31.5 inch across the back. Yeah, it's going to look like a blanket. So that's okay. It is what it is. All right. So the next page, we have gauge. I know it's a dirty word. Nobody wants to do it. It's half the reason why so many of us make make scarves and make cowls or blankets or all sorts of other things because you don't want to do gauge. But here's the kicker, guys. We have to do gauge so that our sweater is going to fit. Gauge simply tells you that, hey, all the math done in this pattern is based off the fact that 17 stitches and 23 rows equal 4 inches using our larger needles, using the size 8 needles. So if you break that down even further, you would take 17 stitches divided by 4. So you need to get 4.25 stitches per inch and 23 rows divided by 4, 5.75 rows per inch in order to make this work. Now, when we're dealing with stitches that are, I mean, that's not very many stitches, guys. You have one stitch over. If we were to get 3.25 stitches per inch, okay, that's a 1/4 of an inch larger for every inch of your sweater. Does you guys with me on that? So if you get 3.25 stitches, I know it seems counterintuitive, but you're getting fewer stitches per inch. So your stitches are bigger. Okay. If you get 3.25 stitches per inch, that's a 1/4 of an inch larger per inch. So if we did that, now let's do this. So 3.25 stitches per inch. And let's stick with the 30-inch back. All right, let's say ours was going to be 30 inches. 30 times 4.25 times 30. So 127.5 equals 4.25. So at 4.25 stitches per inch, 127.5 stitches would give us 30 inches. Okay. If we did 30 inches times 3.25, it would be 97.5 stitches. I'm writing this really poorly, but hopefully you are getting along. All right, so if we had this many stitches and we wanted it to measure that, we would need this many. But our pattern gives us this many stitches per inch to measure that. So we're actually going to cast on what? 134 because it has seaming stitches and stuff too. But let's just say it was, because ours is 63 or 63, not 30. So let's say it was going to tell us to put this. Now, imagine we cast on 127 because you can't do a half stitch, right? So we cast on 127, but we're getting 325 stitches per inch. So we're going to divide that by 3.25 stitches per inch. All right. So hold on. 127 divided by 3.25 equals 39.0769 inches. So by purely getting that one stitch off per inch, okay, one stitch per inch, if you did that across the entire back, you added nearly 10 inches to your back. Do you guys see that? That's one little tiny stitch. So in order to make it so that we don't have a mistake like that, we do that gauge swatch. Make sure that with our size 8 needles, we're getting that 17 stitches and 23 rows. And that would equal 4 inches. Okay. Everybody with me so far? Yeah. Everybody see the importance of a gauge swatch here. One little tiny stitch, and all of a sudden you really are making a baby blanket, right? Like that's what you just turned it into. You're making a sweater. No, honey, you were mistaken. I was making a baby blanket this whole time. You're so precious. So if you are doing your gauge swatch, which I know all of you are going to do, the gauge swatch is given in a stockinette stitch gauge. And these sizes here, these needle sizes, the size 8s and the size 7s. You want to go to my face, Kelly, real quick? I'm going to keep you on your toes tonight, girlfriend. The size 7 and the size 8, those are purely recommendations for your needle size. Now, you might be like, Marley, what do you mean they're recommendations? That's just to tell you, hey, this designer, the way she knits or he knits, they use a size 7 and a size 8 to make all these numbers work. Now you, Anne, you might use a size 9 and a size 10 because you knit differently in order to get those numbers. Teresa, you might use a 6 and a 7. Bonnie, you might have to use like a 5 and a 7. You might have to do it double difference. Are any of you wrong? No. If you get gauge, I don't care what size needle you use to get it. I just care that you got there, right? I don't care if you are a combination knitter. I don't care if you're a continental knitter. I don't care if you're a thrower. I don't care what size needle you need to get that gauge. I just need you to get that gauge. So that way you can make a sweater and not a blanket. Cool? Everybody got that? Because that's something that a lot of people get hung up on. They'll be like, I did a gauge swatch. I had to go down like 3 needle sizes to get gauge. What am I doing wrong? You're not doing anything wrong, girlfriend. You are doing it all right. You're doing everything right because you're doing a gauge swatch. And you know that for how you knit, you need to go down those different needle sizes to get that correct gauge. And you are going to get yourself a great sweater. Nothing wrong with having to go down needle sizes. Nothing wrong with having to go up needle sizes. The only thing that's wrong is when you don't do a gauge swatch. Because there's no such thing, you guys, as knitting to gauge. Oh, I always knit to gauge. How do you know? You don't know how I knit. Well, you might if you've watched me knit before, but you don't know. So you always have to do a gauge swatch, especially if you're going to make something that you're going to wear. It has to fit. You want it to fit. Have I stressed the importance of the gauge swatch? Helen Henry's like, yes, just pass it on already. Okay. All right, Kelly, we're back. Back to the hands. Okay. Kelly's laughing at me, y'all. Okay. Big numbers there. I'm so impressed with all my math here. I just got to say. Okay. So we're coming back over here. So our gauge, 17 stitches, 23 rows, 4 inches in stockinette stitch with our larger needles. So whatever your larger needles are, you try and make sure that you can get that gauge. If you're going to skimp on one or the other, because sometimes it's hard to get both. For me, I would skimp a little bit on my row gauge versus my stitch gauge, because as you're wearing something, gravity is going to take place and it's going to pull it down a little bit and it's going to make your row gauge grow a little bit more. So it's better to make sure that your stitch gauge is spot on. Okay. The little trick there is that we are doing the stripes. You might have to play around with the stripes a little bit at the very end, like at the shoulders, but I bet you'd be all right. Okay. Whew. Need a drink of water real quick. How we doing in the chat room, Allie?
We are doing good. Natalia wants to know.
Yes.
So how do you know if you need to go bigger or smaller on your needles?
Okay. So let's come back over here real quick. So if you're getting 3.25, 4.25, 5.25, okay. It's like, I feel like this is porridge. This is mama's bears, baby bear, whatever. Okay. So right here, your stitches are so big, you're only getting 3 and just a little bit per inch. Right here, your stitches are a little bit smaller, so you're getting 4 and a little bit. Right here, your stitches are even smaller, so you're getting 5 and a little bit. So if you're getting fewer stitches per inch, that means your stitches are too big, so you need a smaller needle. Make sense? This is what we want. So this one, we're spot on. Yay, this is great. This one, we're getting too many stitches per inch. Our stitches are too small, so we need to get a bigger needle. For me, it's so counterintuitive. I'm like, oh, I'm getting more stitches. I need to go down as a needle, where it's really the opposite. Does that help you guys? Yeah? Sylvie, does that help you? Awesome. Okay. So, I mean, guys, this is really... This is how my brain works. I'm like, how does this work? My stitches are too big. That means I'm getting fewer stitches per inch because they're too big. I need to go down a needle size. If I'm getting too many stitches per inch, that means they're too small. I need to go up a needle size. Natalia, hopefully that helps you out and you're pretty good there. So somebody is asking, instead of changing the needle size, can you make a smaller size or a larger size of the sweater to match your gauge? All right, go to my face, Kelly. Here we go. We're going to get some truths on up in here. All right, here we go. Everybody, here we go. You guys ready? Here, ready for this? The real answer, could you do that? Yes. Are you risking the chance of having a sweater that doesn't fit? Yes. Why not change your needle size, get the correct gauge, make the sweater the way it's supposed to be made because of the math, the way the math works out to make it, and make the sweater that fits you. Okay, don't take chances. Don't take chances and skip corners by, oh, I'm just going to make a different size and it'll fit that later on, because that's a crapshoot. You're taking the time to make a sweater. You want to make a sweater, guys. Don't cut corners. Don't cut corners. Make a gauge swatch. Change a needle size the way you need to change a needle size to get the gauge. Follow the pattern. Measure your work as you're working it to make sure your gauge isn't changing. Because newsflash, I don't know this before, but your gauge can change depending on your mood and what time of day it is and all that stuff. So you want to make sure that you're kind of checking it along the way, okay? Don't cut the corner of saying, oh, I'm going to make the smaller size because my gauge is bigger and it's all going to fit well in the end. Because here's the other thing, guys. For those of you ladies and gentlemen out there who are larger like me, for the smaller sizes, it's easier to just exponentially make things a little bit bigger as the sizes get bigger, okay? But at some point in time, a bust gets large enough that only the bust is getting bigger. My arms are not like Godzilla arms, right? I don't need an armhole that starts down here. My armhole needs to be here and be at a relatively, it's not essentially bigger from the size below it. So if you are even a size large, extra large, 2X, so on and so forth, you can't just exponentially be like, oh, I'm just going to make this bigger or make this smaller and it's all going to fit all the way around. Because it doesn't work that way. Our bodies do not work that way. Okay, everybody with me so far? Yeah, I feel like a lot of lecturing here. But this is the crux of it. You're gonna make a sweater, make it fit. Do the right things. Don't cut the corners. So the short answer is, could you do that? Yes. The longer answer and the answer of Marley Bird saying, please don't do that. Just do your work and make it fit the size you are now. That's the other thing, y'all. Okay, here's the other thing. You might be losing weight. You might be on a mission. Oh, the first year I'm going to lose all this weight. I'm going to make that smaller size. Make it the size you are now. And if you lose the weight, good for you. You just get a chance to go out and buy more yarn and make a whole nother sweater. And you get to gift that awesome sweater to somebody else. But make it the size you are now for you. Okay. I have ridden the whole I'm going to lose weight train my whole life. So I understand. I'm speaking from experience and I'm telling you guys, you are beautiful. You are wonderful. You are deserving of the sweater that fits you now. Take the time to do it. Okay. All right. Back to the hands. Any other questions real quick, Allie, while we're here?
Oh, sorry. A
That's
question
okay.
that did just come in. So if your gauge were to change as you're stitching, would you recommend that you change your needles while you're stitching?
That's a very good question. Sometimes it's just a matter of paying attention to how you're knitting. It could be as you're knitting along, you're just getting a little bit more relaxed and your stitches are getting bigger. It could be just a matter of you just trying to pay attention and being diligent to the tension on your needles. So would I recommend changing needle sizes? Only as a last resort. My first suggestion would be just check your tension and try to make sure you're keeping the same tension as you're always working on it. Okay. All right, let's go back over here. The instructions, we already went over this part. Instructions are written from the smallest size to the largest size, and we have the parentheses. We talked about that when we talked about how to, over here. So we have the smallest size outside the parenthesis, and then we have the other sizes inside the parenthesis. And then again, there's also the color that comes into work with Yarnspirations patterns, which is great. Wow, that's a whole lot of information so far, right? We haven't even cast on of our needles. You have your OGO. If you're going to follow along with the striping pattern that is given in the pattern itself, you'll see here, they have different striping patterns. They have stripe pattern 1, stripe pattern 2, stripe pattern 3. Their intention there is for you to use specific colors. You can see here it says with color D, with color E, with color C, with color E, with color B, with color E, with color A, and then with A and E, and then B and C. Their intention is for you to take this logo, open it up, and separate your colors out. And what you could do is you could put these in individual like baggies. You could put them in their own individual like project bags, but label each one with whatever color they are. So that way you have individual colors to do the striping. Now, like I said at the beginning, if you don't want to do that, if you just want to grab a color and just start making a sweater and let the stripings go wherever they want to, you can do that. But their intention here, and that's what they wrote over here, is for you to separate the colors so that way you can use each one individually whenever you need to do it as the pattern is written over here. Okay. Now, before you start the back, the first thing you would do is do your gauge swatch. Now, what I would do for my gauge swatch, you guys, is I would cast on enough stitches to measure like 6 inches. Do not put garter stitch around the bottom or the sides. That might seem counterintuitive, okay? But here's the deal. Let's take a peek at this. So I was doing a different class today with duplicate stitch. Down here, this is a broken rib, but if I were doing this as a gauge swatch, I would not want this ribbing down here. Just ribbing down here, it pulls in my stitches down here at the bottom. If I did garter stitch or anything over here on the side, does it make it less? But it squishes my rows and it doesn't really give me an accurate row count. So when you're going to do a stockinette stitch gauge, don't do any sort of bean or anything on the bottom or the sides. Just let it be stockinette stitch. And when you go to measure it, you want to measure it larger than your 4 inches if you can. But your tape measure or whatever it may be, it's like this one. This is a large one here. This is almost 11 inches. But let's say this was 40 stitches. I could take my 40 divided by 11 and come up with how many inches per inch I have. If you want to do it exactly, you know, your 4 inches and 4 inches stuff, you could measure across exactly 4 inches and like put up there and then go back and count how many stitches you have, like from that point to where your pin is, count your stitches across and then divide it up. However, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you guys. If you know, hey, I'm going to cast on 30 stitches, 40 stitches, and measure your whole thing, you measure your whole thing flat. You know you have 30 stitches, measure your whole thing flat. Let's say it was 11 inches or whatever it is. You would take your 11 divided by 30 and you'd have a really accurate number. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. Same thing with the row gauge. If you cast on 30, let's say you knit 30 rows, you can measure your 30 rows and figure out how many, inches it is and then divide it up. For me, here's the question. Somebody's gonna be like, well, then do I rip that out? Do I keep that? What do I do with my gauge swatch? For me, you guys, I keep my gauge swatches. Couple reasons why. One, I like to go back and check my gauge on my gauge swatch compared to my actual project. Two, you'll notice here I have little eyelets. I actually put whatever size needle I use to knit that gauge swatch. I make an eyelet for each of, so this was a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This was a size 8 needle. Does that make sense? 3, if I need this yarn at the end of my project for whatever reason, I can undo this and I can use this for seaming. I could use it for just like little bits of stitches that I might need to do at the top of my shoulders. It's not going to require, the chances of me requiring like a whole bunch of yarn at the end, then that's just where I need to get a whole new ball of yarn. But this is really convenient just to undo if I need it for seaming or something. And then also, this is a whole, say you finish the sweater, later on you get a hole in it or something, you now have leftover yarn that you can use to patch a hole or whatever with it. Does that make sense? So I always keep my gauge swatches. and they're convenient to help teach classes for duplicate stitch if you need to do that. So you can do that also. But when you do your gauge swatch, I like to make my gauge swatches really big. I make them larger than my 4 inches, and I make them larger than my 4 inches this way. So that way I can measure all the way across and all the way this way. And then I divide to make sure I have the correct stitch count. Okay. And we're dealing with an acrylic yarn, so I'm not worried about a blocked gauge because we're working with acrylic. If this was a wool or something, I would be blocking it and working it with it that way, but we don't have to worry too much about that. Once you've done all that, you have the correct stuff, you're actually ready to start. Feels like it's taken us a long time to get here, and we're here. So we have our back. I know I'm doing the 134 stitches, and I'm going to cast on for my back. So I'm casting on right down here with my 134 stitches. Okay. Says I'm going to do a knit 2, purl 2 ribbing. And then I have knit 2. So I have knit 2, purl, or knit 2, purl 2, knit 2 at all the way across. So I will have a selvage stitch over here and over here. Okay, so I'm going to start with the knit 2 and end with the knit 2 on the right side, start with the purl 2, end with the purl 2 on the wrong side. Okay, and I'm going to do that ribbing. It says repeat the last 2 rows ribbing 8 times more. So I'm going to have 10 rows total. So I'm just going to put this here. So if I go like this, I have 10 rows of ribbing, right? We know 5.75 rows gives us 1 inch. So we're getting a little bit more than, or a little bit less than 2 inches, right? Because we do 10 divided by 5.75, right? 10 divided by 5.75 rows per inch. So 1.73 inches. So our ribbing down here equals 1.73 inches. That's really super precise, you know? But if you were somebody who's like, I want to do it 2 inches, you could. You guys with me on that? Wait, am I doing that right? 1, 2. So that would be 20 rows. I'm sorry, guys. That's if it was just 10. It's 20 rows because there's 2 rows in each one of those. So 2 rows 10 times. So it's 20 rows. So it's 20. See? 20 divided by 5.75. Who's out there yelling at me like, no, that's not right. It's actually 3.47 inches. So it's a good amount of ribbing. It's 3.5 inches of ribbing. Okay. Tells you you're going to break your color D. So we started with color D and we started with smaller needles. You're going to break your color D. Then you change to your larger needles. So here's where you're going to your larger needles. And we're going to work in stripe pattern 1. So all that really means, guys, is as your work's on your smaller needles like this, you wouldn't use your other needle. You're not going to be in the round like this. But you would just grab your bigger needles and you start knitting on your bigger needles, because the size of your stitch is determined by the needle you're knitting onto, not off of. So you simply hold your larger needle in your right hand as you're knitting and just knit off of your smaller needle onto your larger. And that's all you have to do to change to your larger needles. You don't have to move them over one by one or anything. Just knit directly onto your larger needles. And you're going to follow stripe pattern number 1 until the piece from the beginning measures, for me, it'd be 25.5 inches. So that means it's going to come up to here. This is about 3.5, and it's this whole thing here. If they want me to have it measure 25.5, right? So 22 inches. So I'm going to do 22 inches here. Is that right? Is that my math correct? So this whole section in just stockinette is going to be 22 inches for me. Now, if I wanted to break it down even more for myself, I know they have it here. They have 4 inches with color D, 1 inch with color E, 4 inches with color C, 1 inch with color E. So you can break this down row for row if you want and figure things out. So like, let's see. So 4 times 5.75. So what I did there is I took 4 inches times 5.75 rows per inch means 23 rows. So 4 inches with this whole thing means 23 rows. Now, am I supposed to do 23 rows or will it be 24 rows? I'm not sure until I get really into it. But that's going to be my goal based on that row gauge. Does that make sense? Do you guys see where I got that? Okay. 1 inch. This one, I mean, we can't do 5.75, but maybe we round up to 6 rows. To me, I'd want to keep it even. So I probably would either drop that to 22 or go up to 24 or 22. I would decide. I would make a decision there because I have to do it again consistently throughout here, right? If I round up, I'm making it just that little bit longer, right? Making it that little bit longer each time because it's just one more row, but it's one more row there, one more row there, one more row there, one more row there. That's almost a full inch longer. You guys with me on that? Okay. So you have to decide if you're going to round up or round down. And you don't even have to, you could do 23. I'm just somebody, I prefer to keep that an even number, which they do too, because it says ending on a Purl Row. So they would keep that an even number. So I would keep it an even number. I would either make that 22 or 24. I would make that decision. For me, I'd probably do 22, but that's me. And then since you've already figured that out, you can now say, okay, 4 inches here. Let's say since I already did 24 there, I'm going to write 24. And let's say that was 6 and 24 and 6 and 24. And then it says these 19 inches form a stripe pattern. So that says that's supposed to be 19 inches. Form the stripe pattern. This says 25 and a half. So 19 plus 3.5, that doesn't give us 25 and a half. So change to A when the stripe pattern one is complete and ending in Purl Row. So once this is done, you could change to A. Now, think about this with me here, guys. Right here, I rounded up to 24. Okay, so I added 1, 1, 1, and 1. So maybe instead of 19 inches, maybe I'm already at 21. I mean, let's just, for example purposes, let's say I'm already at 21 inches. The good news here is that over here, it says once I have finished this striping pattern, I'm supposed to go to my color A and work until it measures this. So all that means is, instead of being at 19, to get to 22 with my A, I just have to do 1 inch instead of however many inches somebody would be with 19 inches. Does that make sense? Are you guys following along with me here? So this allows us to have some wiggle room here with our row gauge over here, which goes back to my whole thing over here of if you have to compensate on one of these, compensate on your row gauge, don't compensate on your stitch gauge. You guys see how this is all kind of working together here? Okay. Now, here's the other thing. For me, you might be thinking, this is a lot of work. I just want to pick up a pattern and start knitting. You could do that, right? But I'm trying to make sure you have a successful finished project. By figuring out how many rows you're going to do for each one, when you go to start knitting it, you now have a chance to take like a Post-it note or something, which I often will do. I love Post-it notes. Those of you who don't know, I love them. I might do a Post-it note and say, okay, so I'm here and then I have all of this. I might go with D. So I would write D. And then for each time I finish one, I would do a tick mark until I got to my 24. Does that make sense? All right. Because I would do that on the back. You want to know why? When you get to the front, you do the exact same thing. And why do you do that? Because you want your front and your back stripes to match. Right? They match here on the side when you seam them up. So you want to make sure you have the same number of rows, the front and back. So if you already know how many rows you are doing and you're keeping track of those, you can do that on the front and the back. And then boom, Heather, you have stripes that match. You guys with me on that? Yeah? Okay. I know this is extra work, y'all, but I'm telling you, it's going to give you a better pattern. A better a sample. So you guys get this, you work through, you have it to where it measures where you need to, but then this is the part I wanted to make sure I get to. You end with the purl row. So you end on the wrong side. So you're on a right side. So if we're treating this like a normal piece of fabric where you stretch back and forth, we ended when it was on the wrong side. We flip it over. We're on the right side, which means our work is over here at this point, right? If we follow this instructions, it says cast off, and then it'll be 12 stitches. So what will happen is I will bind off 12 stitches. It says at the beginning of the next 6 rows. So I'll bind off 12 stitches, and then I'll work across. And then I'll bind off 12 stitches, and then I'll work across. And then I'll bind off 12 stitches, and then I'll work across. Bind off 12 stitches, work across. You see what I'm doing here? All right. So it's making it so that the shoulders are getting bound off. And what will happen, so it says at the next 6 rows, and then it says 10 stitches beginning following 2 rows. So then once I get the 6 rows, it'll be 10 stitches and then 10 stitches. So it'll be 10 and 10, which will leave this number of stitches. It'll leave 42 for my example. And I put those on a holder. Those 42 stitches, obviously, guys, I took up more room here than what yours will, but those 42 stitches, that's the back of your sweater. It's right here. That's the back of your neck. You see that? This here can be very confusing, but if you sit down and break it down and kind of draw it out on what you're doing, it will help you understand what's happening. And once again, doing this, you can take a Post-it note and then be like, check, 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 check on each side. And you can do that for the back and the front because they're going to match up. Now, on the back, you're working all the way across, right? But when you get to the front and you get to this part here, right? Right here, we have to shape for the left neck. So all that means for the front, you've cast on fewer stitches. Not fewer, I'm sorry. You've cast on all the same number of stitches. You've worked up. And then it says you're going to work for the left of the neck. So it says, ending on the purl row with color A, proceed as follows. Shape the left neck, right side. You'll knit across 31 stitches. And then it says you'll do a knit 2 together, and that says neck edge, and then you're going to turn. So you turn your work. That means all of these stitches right here, they're just going to be sitting there. You're going to leave those unworked because you're going to work back and forth right here until that's done. And then you're going to come back over here and work across over here to get that shoulder. So that way your shoulders on the front and the back will meet up right here and right here. Here's your stitches on a holder. Here's your stitches right here that are going to end up being, they're going to be right here. They're going to be skipped on the front. So this is going to be your overall neck opening. This is where you're going to seam shoulders together. And then you're going to have this really beautiful sweater that you have sleeves for, and it goes on your merry little way. The reason I wanted to make sure I pointed all of this kind of stuff out is because I think that's where a lot of people can get confused when it comes to the actual construction. Okay. Because you're doing this sort of stair-stepping shaping. You're like, I don't understand. When really, guys, it's, if you just follow the instructions, you will get it. You bind off some, you work across. You bind off some, you work across. You bind off some, you work across. Bind off and come across. And you're finishing each side of the back, and then you're putting those on a holder. Great. So then you do the front. You work across, and then we're going to shape the neck because our neck on the front is going to be deeper than the back. Okay. So we're shaping the neck by working this knit 2 together, which is going to make our fabric curve. And then over here, we're going to do an SSK. It's going to make our fabric curve. Okay. Not that drastic, but you get the idea. Yeah. Everybody with me on that? Okay. I'm going to keep going here real quick. So once you do that on both sides of the shoulder, if you were to hold the front and the back together, they're going to meet up. They're going to look, they just look reverse of each other, actually. And you'll be like, oh, I can see what's happening here because you've shaped the neck and then you shape the shoulders here and then you meet them up. See, here we go. This is your neck that's going to be a little bit deeper than your back, but everything else is just shaping up. It's all going to meet up like a puzzle. Okay. Sleeves, very easy. They're made back and forth. You start down here and you just work increases. right? Are they increased? Right side. Increase 2 stitches evenly across the last row. After you do your ribbing, change a larger needle. You work the stripe. We already know how to do the stripe and to figure out all of those, how many rows you're going to do for each one of those, right? We know how to do that. Keep working the piece until it measures however distance you want, ending with the purl row and then cast off. This doesn't even have you increase then, huh? Nope, you don't even have to increase. I wonder. No, here it is right there. Increase 1 stitch at each end of the next and the following 4th rows. So for that, y'all, that's where I would probably get graph paper. I'm not probably, this is what I would do. I would get graph paper and I would write like, so it says increase the 1st stitch at the next row. So I would be, that's an increase row. And it says the following 4th row until there are X number of stitches. So I'd go, there's an increase row. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I would calculate, okay, so I increased 2 stitches there. I increased 2 stitches there. I increased 2 stitches there, so on and so forth. So I would calculate how many increases do I need where I increase 2 stitches, one at the beginning and one at the end, until I get to the number of stitches that I need. So if I started with 52, I need to get to 86. So 52, I need to get to 86. What's the difference there? That's 4, 5, 6, that's 3, right? Is that 34? So I need to do plus 34. If you divide that by 2, because it's 1 on each side, so that's 2. Gosh, I can't even think. So 15, 16, 17. Is that 17? Everybody, is that 17? I can't, I'm going to do my calculator. I can't think. 34 divided by 2, 17. Okay. So 17 stitches. So 17 increases actually is what it would be. So there'd be 17 increases. So I would do on my graph paper or something, I would have this where I got up to where I had the 17 here. And then as I finished each one, I would mark it off, be like, oh, okay, that's an increase row. I finished it. Then there's my normal row, a normal row, an increase row, a normal, increase. And then so if I did that on the right sleeve, on my left sleeve, I'd be like, okay, increase row, normal, increase. You see what I mean? So I literally break these patterns down into a workable chart for me to be able to check mark things off. So that way my front and back measured correctly. My sleeves are going to be the correct size. They're going to be the same distance. They're going to fit. And then once all these pieces are done, all you need to do, it says pin them to measurement and cover with the damp cloth, leave the cloth to dry. All that means is you're just kind of lightly blocking it to lay them out. And then you just seam them together. When you seam these together, you start off with the shoulders. Okay, guys, you start off with the shoulders. What are they doing here? Wait, they have you seam the right shoulder. Sew the right shoulder. All right, so you start off with this right shoulder first. Leave the left shoulder seam open. And then you're going to do your neck band. And then they have you do this left seam. Well, that's interesting. I've never done it that way before. Regardless, you seam this one, you do your neck band, then you seam this one, and then you fit your shoulder, what are those called? Your sleeves. You put your sleeves between your body and seam all of those together. It's really not so hard, especially if you're going to use like a mattress stitch, which you can look up on the internet and it's really easy together. But here's the deal, guys. You might be thinking, well, I just spent an hour and this lady just talked the whole time. But here's the deal. Okay, Kelly, go to my face. Here we are. I just went through an entire pattern and broke it down with you guys in a way that I wish somebody had done with me the very first time I ever made a sweater. Because the first time I made a sweater, it was like, oh, this cannot be that hard. I'm just going to jump in. I'm just going to do this. And then you start getting in and then it's like, oh, you're supposed to do what? I got to do what? Well, how many have I already done? And you start to get off track. So doing things in this manner, breaking things down for yourself, whether it's on Post-it notes, on a graph paper, on a Google Sheet. I use Google Sheets all the time. Those of you who follow me know I have Google Sheets all the time when we're doing sweaters like this. Breaking it down for you to make it work in a way that it just takes it, those bite-sized pieces, it will make it so that you have a successful sweater knitting experience. When you're dealing with stripes and such like this, it's really important to make sure everything is lined up appropriately and go working back. And it's just going to be so much easier if you break things down and make things easier for you to follow along, so you don't have to think too much about it. Which I get, you might be like, well, you just did a whole lot of thinking right there. Yeah, I did. But think about it. I did it at the start before I even cast on. I don't want to sit there and have to think too much when I'm actually knitting. I want to enjoy the knitting. If I get all the thinking done beforehand, I can just sit there and just tick off as I'm knitting along. That's where your joy comes into it. So here's the big takeaway from this. You just took a class on how to make a sweater. You can absolutely cast on, do your gauge swatch, and get started with your sweater. You have all the tools you need to do it. And I know you can do this. Don't let the whole idea of having to get gauge, having things measure what they're supposed to measure scare you, because you can absolutely make a sweater, have it done by Thanksgiving if you wanted to, and wear it with pride. I know you can do this. All right. I believe in you guys. If you are going to tackle a sweater, this one or any sweater, please tag us on social media. Especially, I would love to see your sweater. Use hashtag Marley Bird, hashtag Yarnspo, hashtag Make It with Michaels. We love to see your work. All right, you guys. Okay, I hope I did not scare you guys. Helen, did I scare you? No? All right. Okay, Heather, I didn't mean to pick on you, my friend. Sylvie, hi. All right. Okay. Bonnie, Anne, Teresa, Clovis, thank you guys for joining us. Allie, I'm going to give it to you.
Perfect. Well, thank you everybody so much for joining us at another Michael's Community Classroom. We look forward to seeing you back again soon. Be sure to check out other classes that are listed at michaels.com/classes. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a wonderful rest of your night, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.